about 10. He's home, and that's all that really matters. Rennie Fang 03. Summary. 5 years ago, Donnie lost his twin brother. Then, the family busted into Draxum's lab to learn that Leo had escaped the madman a year ago. A few weeks later, a mysterious stranger is helping them fight off the new mutants in New York City. A sequel to my previous fic, Just Glad You're Home. I highly recommend reading that first. Notes. Here's so all of y'all that wanted a part 2 grinning face. Here's Donnie's perspective. I hope I wrote him well. This one just kinda wrote itself, and I'm not gonna look a gift horse in the mouth, and just accept that I finally wrote something. See the end of the work for more notes. Work text. Donnie could say with full confidence that the day his twin brother disappeared was the worst day of his life, but watching April disappear through a mysterious portal with powerful, demonic creatures was coming in a close second. Luckily, Raph quickly took control of the situation when Mikey pointed out that the symbol on the wall was similar to the coin thing that Splinter had. The three brothers gathered behind their father's chair as the TV played in the background. Asking for the coin was an obvious no-go. After Leo's capture, Splinter rarely let them out of the lair. It was Donnie privately telling him about the trackers he'd placed on all of them that convinced Splinter to let them out of his sight at all. Donnie wanted to punch himself for giving in when April rejected his attempt at giving her a tracker. Without giving them away, April never spent enough time in the lair to actually sleep, so Donnie had no chance of sneaking it on her like he had with his brothers. He should have pushed her harder, let her know that he was scared of this exact type of situation. When they got her back, Donnie was not going to back down so easily. He couldn't risk losing any more of his family. Donnie? Mikey's voice knocked Donnie from his thoughts. Yes, Angelo, we waited until Dad fell asleep, and Raph grabbed the coin. You've been checked out. Are you okay? Donnie took a deep breath. His limbs felt heavy, and the air seemed thick. He took one more breath, and almost felt right again. Yeah, I'm fine. Let's go find April. Mikey and Raph shared a look before Raph led the weight back to the construction site in silence. Donnie held his upper arm, fidgeting with the knot that kept his twin's mask in place. One more deep breath. He wasn't losing anyone else. They had more training, better tech, and now, some sort of access to another realm, dimension. Whatever it was new, and they had a way to enter. Or so he thought, until he saw Raph struggling with the coin. The snapper stared at it as if something would happen if he looked hard enough. All right, big guy. Let's let the artist solve this one, Mikey boasted, grabbing the coin and holding it up to the slab of concrete, before moving it around, successfully opening whatever portal April had disappeared into earlier. Mikey's smile of pride was quickly shadowed by hesitance and doubt. All the brothers stared into the portal, taking in the drop that had no distinct ending. Donnie took a deep breath. Leo would probably make a joke about Olympic diving. Donnie's breath caught in his throat at the unwelcome thought of his twin. Where had that even come from? It's not like he didn't think about Leo, but he'd never let himself dwell on how things could have been. Before he could be questioned by Raph and Mikey, or more accurately, Dr. Feelings, judging by the way the orange-masked turtle glanced at him, Donnie jumped in. With a shout, his brothers followed him. The fall felt both long and short at the same time before he suddenly met the rough ground. By all logic, the fall should have killed him, but something had killed enough of his momentum that he was only sore. Raph and Mikey landed next to him, on either side. They both groaned as they sat up from their painful belly flops. Where are we? Raph asked. Donnie's witty quip died on his tongue when he looked up. The place was beautiful. It looked almost like a fantastical rendition of New York. Something buzzed in the air that made Donnie shudder. As pretty as it was, nothing about their current location made any logical sense, and that put Donnie on edge. Maybe he could hook up to whatever security system this place had. Maybe his twin was here. Leaving the thought in the back of his mind, Donnie stood up and watched as April ran towards them. Oh, April was running towards them. For a moment, Donnie could pretend it was Leo approaching, but April's shouting broke his weak illusion. Guys, we're deep under New York in some sort of hidden mystic city. Donnie shuddered. He was not a believer of magic. Oh joy, he muttered. Mikey was still entranced by the pretty scenery, while Raph looked around, growing more concerned by the second. Have you found any sign of the dog thingy? April's face fell as she pointed to the tall, creepy building behind her. The big guy's headed in there. I didn't want to stick too close in fear of being caught. Raph smiled widely, and any guilt April held seemed to melt away. Thank goodness. Now, we can all go together, as a team. Mikey and Donnie nodded. We should still be careful. We don't know what we're getting into, Donnie warned. The others nodded, and they all snuck off to the lab. Something akin to anxiety rippled under Donnie's scales. Something heavy settled in his gut, but he pushed forward. Getting into the lab was shockingly easy. They stalked around the empty hallways, April was in the lead, passing by a large opening in the hallway. Guys, there's a weapons room up ahead. Let's get. Raph's response faded out as he looked out of the opening. His expression was frozen in shock, piquing Donnie's interest. Donnie peeked around his older brother and froze at the sight. Baron Draxum was standing at a table near the large container that held some sort of poisonous-looking ooze. Baron Draxum was standing in the room right beneath him. Baron Draxum. Without a second thought, Donnie felt anger flood his entire body, and he couldn't even bring himself to hate it. As quickly and deadly as possible, he deployed his tech bow and attacked Draxum, hitting the top of the sheep man's mask with as much force as he could muster. Donnie landed on the ground a few feet behind the man that still towered over him, and grinned. His grin was replaced with a scowl when Draxum turned toward him, glare peeking through his cracked mask. "You turtles are insufferable," he grumbled. Donnie launched himself at the taller man with a feral growl, using all the power in his tech bow to attack. He couldn't manage to land a hit. Raph fell down from above with a growl, punching at Draxum with a new weapon in his hands. The weapons room, Donnie's mind offered. Donnie was relieved that his brother didn't try to fight barehanded after his weapons were broken earlier that night. "You!" Raph yelled. "Where's our brother?" Draxum didn't give them a response other than using his vines to attack. A flaming, hyper ball shot through the lab, bouncing off everything, cutting through some of the vines. Donnie heard his youngest brother scream as he was dragged after it. "Magic weapon," Mikey yelled. Raph perked up and flung his own new weapons around. "Magic weapon, magic weapon, magic weapon, magic!" He was cut off as his own activated, and shot him backwards. Draxum grumbled. "With some training you could be as good as your brother." Donnie saw red and immediately launched himself at the sheep man. "What did you do with him?" "I trained him properly. He was a great warrior." Draxum blocked another one of Donnie's attacks. He looked at Donnie like he was analyzing a book. "You have the potential to best him. With your tech, where's he?" Donnie shouted again. He barely registered Mikey flying behind him via his hyper flaming weapon. He could hear April and Raph somewhere else in the lab. There was no sign of Leo. "What did you do with my brother?" Draxum frowned. "Your brother ran away, like a fool. He was doing so well, but he ran the second he got the chance." Donnie froze. "What?" "Leo supposedly ran away, yet the brother had seen no sign of him. He'd come back home, right?" Donnie thought desperately. Draxum used the brother's shock to his advantage, and caught them all in some sort of plant-like rope. Raph and Mikey were captured together. April and Donnie were by themselves. And the weird dog creature seemed to have escaped capture, but didn't leave. "He's probably dead by now, but it's no problem. With your brains, you'll become a much better weapon than he could ever be," Draxum said. "Your brother never saw the bigger picture, but I know you would. You're able to think beyond yourself, and you're quiet." The smile on Draxum's face made Donnie's stomach twist. The entire lab shook as Draxum opened his mouth to continue, before April interrupted. "Is your lab exploding part of your grand plan?" Her voice had an edge of panic that made Donnie look toward the center of the lab. He flipped his goggles down with a quick nod, and took note of the high readings. "It's gonna blow," he shouted. He braced himself against April's side before he was suddenly met with cold air. He opened his eyes to see himself, and the rest of them, sitting in the dirt just outside the slab of cement that still had an open portal. They all took a moment to breathe before the portal rumbled, and millions of little bugs, containing the ooze, flew out into the city. They stared as the portal closed, and the bugs spread out over their beloved city. "He's out there," Donnie muttered quietly. He quickly grabbed at the mask tied around his arm, hope burning in his chest. "Donnie," Dr. Feelings whispered. Donnie could feel his little brother's sturdy glare before he even turned around. "You can't spend every second staring at security cameras. It's been years." Donnie scowled, but before he could say anything, April spoke up. "Maybe, with this we could catch something new." She held up a small, glowing crystal. "Donnie, you could use this to upgrade your tech." "Yeah," Donnie nodded as his little brother frowned. "April, why are you encouraging his unhealthy behavior?" "Because I would like to propose a compromise between you two. Donnie can upgrade his tech with the crystal, and use a program to scan the city, setting off an alarm so he doesn't stay up for days again." "Don't give me that look, Donnie. I know that's well within your skill set." Donnie frowned, but nodded. "I can work with that. Let's go back to the lair." Dr. Feelings frowned, but didn't say anything. Donnie led the way as his brothers followed. It was only a few weeks later when Donnie noticed something new happening in their beloved city. At first, he thought the strange signature was another mutant, but it followed a strange pattern, and it followed the path of previous mutations before always appearing back at the same spot. Whoever was leaving these odd signatures seemed to be fighting against the new, chaotic mutants caused by Draxum's weird little bugs. Donnie was thankful, but didn't want to be too careful with his trust. His plan was to sneak out but himself. But Mikey and Raph met him on the roof of an apartment complex near their main entrance to the sewers. "What are you up to, Donnie?" Raph asked. Donnie hesitated before explaining. "There's someone, or something, leaving odd, mystic readings in the city. They seem to be fighting the new mutants with us. I think it's odd that we've never seen them. So I wanted to make sure they were safe." Donnie sighed as he watched Mikey and Raph share a silent conversation. Mikey nodded and turned toward Donnie. "We're going to follow close behind in case you need backup. But we won't crowd you." Donnie was almost shocked. But he wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. "Let's go." They just got back to their base, Donnie said, staring at the map he pulled up on his tech sleeve. The trip was silent and quick, despite being a decent distance away from their lair. Donnie stopped for a moment, motioning for his brothers to stay put while he jumped forward. He noticed a small base, made out of cardboard and different fabrics. Donnie approached slowly, but not silently. If this stranger really was on their side, he didn't want to come off as a threat. There was shuffling from the inside as Donnie peered around the entrance and froze. The wide, terrified eyes of his twin stared back. Leo was shaking. He held up a sword defensively, but it shook in his grasp. His stance also gave away the shaking that seemed to originate from his knees, but he remained still. "Leo?" His brother flinched and adjusted his grip on his sword. "Don," he whispered. His voice sounded like it had been put through a blender with sandpaper. Before Donnie could do anything, he swiped his sword through the air, and a portal opened behind him. He stepped back and disappeared as Donnie reached forward. "No, Leo!" Donnie shouted. Before he could break down, a hoarse scream rang through the night. Donnie rushed outside and watched as a portal closed just above Raph and Mikey. Donnie ran over to them immediately. He noticed how Leo was curled into himself, shaking, on top of Raph's plastron, the eldest brother laying flat on his back. "Leo!" he shouted. Mikey looked between Donnie and Leo before the tears finally fell. "This is real, right?" Mikey whispered, looking at Donnie. He nodded as Mikey cried out, "Leo?" Anything else Mikey wanted to say was incoherent as he dropped to his knees, sobbing. For a moment, everything was all right until Leo was scrambling away from Raph and Mikey in a panic. He pushed himself directly into Donnie, who tried to hold him gently to prevent him from going over the edge of the roof. Leo looked up at him in panic, opening and closing his mouth without any sound. Tears pooled in his eyes, and Donnie removed his hand from Leo's back and froze. It didn't take a genius to realize Leo was beginning to panic badly. "Leo, breathe. Come on, Nardo. I know you can do it. Breathe in, hold, then out." Donnie tried to coach, but it didn't seem like his twin heard a single word he said. Raph rushed forward as the slider's eyes closed, and he fell sideways, away from Donnie. The eldest held Leo's body tightly as he passed out. Donnie was quick to check for a pulse, and breathed out a relieved sigh when he found it quickly, feeling the panic fading from his unconscious brother. "He's okay," he muttered before a sob caught in his throat. "He's okay." All three brothers were quickly reduced to a sobbing mess on the rooftop. "Donnie," April said sternly, "if you don't go the fuck to bed, I will let Dr. Delicate touch loose." Donnie didn't give April a response as he continued to stare at his twin, who was sleeping peacefully on the extra cot they kept in the medbay. He didn't dare take his eyes off Leo, in case his twin disappeared again. April sighed. "Come on, Don, it's been a full day. You can't sit here until he wakes up and expect to be prepared for whatever he needs." "Yes, I can, really?" April sounded skeptical. In a few quick movements, she kicked his stool away and knocked him to the floor. "And what if he decides to fight his way out? Do you really think you can stop him like this?" Donnie glanced at Leo before looking back to April. "You have a point, but what if he disappears while I'm asleep? What if I wake up and this was all a dream? What if—" The sound of the door opening caught Donnie's attention. Surprisingly, he found himself looking into Mikey's eyes rather than Dr. Feeling's. "Donnie, me and Raph can keep watch while you get some sleep." April coughed obnoxiously. "Me, Raph, and April, Raph, April, and I," Donnie muttered. He sighed. "Okay." Donnie remained on the ground and turned his gaze toward Leo. "So, are you just gonna sit there and critique our grammar? Or are you going to go to bed before Dr. Delicate Touch takes matters into his own hands?" April asked. Mikey giggled before walking to Leo's side and scooting the slider closer to the edge of the bed. "Here, Donnie, you can sleep next to him." April helped Donnie stand and smiled at Mikey. "Good thinking, Mikey." Donnie nodded in agreement and hesitantly climbed into the bed next to his twin. When Leo showed no signs of discomfort, Donnie sighed with relief. He let himself relax and grabbed his twin's hand. He closed his eyes and didn't bother trying to fight off sleep this time. He knew that the morning would bring a whole new set of challenges, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt confident that they could handle whatever came their way. For the first time in 5 years, he felt whole again. Notes: I hope y'all enjoyed Grinning Face. Also, 'cause a few people have asked, yes, you can make fan art of this AU. I do ask that you tag me in it or send it to me either on Tumblr at Sadleon or on Instagram at Wilbur's Hibana. Series this work belongs to. Previous work part 2 of Lonely Leo. Our next work.